Chapter 38. Lin Hsiao-Hsiang carries the first prize in the poems on chrysanthemums. Hsueh Heng-wu chaffs Pao-yü by composing verses in the same style as his on the crabs. After Pao-Chiau and Xiang, we will now explain. Settled everything in their deliberations, nothing memorable occurred. The whole night, which deserves to be put on record. The next day, Xiang Zhen invited Dowager Lady Chia and her other relatives to come and look at the Alia flowers. Old Lady Chia and everyone else answered that as she had had the kind attention to ask them, they felt it their duty to avail themselves of her gracious invitation, much though they would be putting her to trouble and inconvenience. At 12 o'clock, therefore, old Lady Chia actually took with her Madame Wang and Lady Feng, as well as Mrs. Xu and other members of her family whom she had asked to join them, and repaired into the garden. "Which is the best spot?" old Lady Chia inquired. "We are ready to go wherever you may like, dear senior," Madame Wang ventured in response. "A collation has already been spread in the lotus fragrance arbor," Lady Feng interposed. "Besides, the 2 alia plants on that hill yonder are now lovely in their full blossom, and the water of that stream is jade-like and pellucid. So if we sit in the pavilion in the middle of it, won't we enjoy an open and bright view? It will be refreshing too to our eyes to watch the pool." "Quite right," assented Dowager Lady Chia at this suggestion. And while expressing her approbation, she ushered her train of followers into the arbor of lotus fragrance. This arbor of lotus fragrance had, in fact, been erected in the center of the pool. It had windows on all 4 sides. On the left and on the right stood covered passages, which spanned the stream and connected with the hills. At the back figured a winding bridge. As the party ascended the bamboo bridge, Lady Feng promptly advanced and supported Dowager Lady Chia. "Venerable ancestor," she said, "just walk boldly and with confident step. There's nothing to fear. It's the way of these bamboo bridges to go on creaking like this." Presently, they entered the arbor. Here they saw 2 additional bamboo tables placed beyond the balustrade. On the one were arranged cups, chopsticks, and every article necessary for drinking wine. On the other were laid bamboo utensils for tea, a tea service, and various cups and saucers. On the off side, 2 or 3 waiting maids were engaged in fanning the stove to boil the water for tea. On the near side were visible several other girls, who were trying with their fans to get a fire to light in the stove so as to warm the wines. "It was a capital idea," Dowager Lady Chia hastily exclaimed laughingly with vehemence, "to bring tea here. What's more, the spot and the appurtenances are alike so spick and span. These things were brought by cousin Pao-Chiau," Xiang Yun smilingly explained. "So I got them ready. This child is, I say, so scrupulously particular," old Lady Chia observed, "that everything she does is thoroughly devised." As she gave utterance to her feelings, her attention was attracted by a pair of scrolls of black lacquer, inlaid with mother-of-pearl, suspended on the pillars, and she asked Xiang Yun to tell her what the mottos were. The text she read was, "Snapped is the shade of the hibiscus by the fragrant oar of a boat homeward bound. Deep flows the perfume of the lily and the lotus underneath the bamboo bridge." After listening to the motto, old Lady Chia raised her head and cast a glance upon the tablet. Then turning round, "Long ago when I was young," she observed, addressing herself to Mrs. Xu, "we likewise had at home a pavilion like this called the Hall Reclining on the Russet Clouds, or some other such name. At that time, I was of the same age as the girls, and my wont was to go day after day and play with my sisters there. One day, I unexpectedly slipped and fell into the water, and I had a narrow escape from being drowned. For it was after great difficulty that they managed to drag me out safe and sound. But my head was, after all, bumped about against the wooden nails. So much so that this hole of the length of a finger, which you can see up to this day on my temple, comes from the bruises I sustained. All my people were in a funk that I'd be the worse for this ducking and continued in fear and trembling lest I should catch a chill. It was dreadful, dreadful. They opined, but I managed, little though everyone thought it, to keep in splendid health." Lady Feng allowed no time to anyone else to put in a word. But anticipating them, "Had you then not survived, who would now be enjoying these immense blessings?" She smiled. "This makes it evident that no small amount of happiness and long life were in store for you, venerable ancestor," from your very youth up. It was by the agency of the spirits that this hole was knocked open so that they might fill it up with happiness and longevity. The old man Xiaoxing had, in fact, a hole in his head, which was so full of every kind of blessing conducive to happiness and long life that it bulged up ever so high. Before, however, she could conclude, Dowager Lady Chia and the rest were convulsed with such laughter that their bodies doubled in two. "This monkey is given to dreadful tricks," laughed old Lady Chia. "She's always ready to make a scapegoat of me to evoke amusement. But would that I could take that glib mouth of yours and rend it in pieces. It's because I feared that the cold might, when you by and by have some crabs to eat, accumulate in your intestines," Lady Feng pleaded, "that I tried to induce you, dear senior, to have a laugh, so as to make you gay and merry. For one can, when in high spirits, indulge in a couple of them more with impunity." "By and by," smiled old Lady Chia, "I'll make you follow me day and night, so that I may constantly be amused and feel my mind diverted. I won't let you go back to your home. It's that weakness of yours for her, venerable senior," Madame Wang observed with a smile, "that has got her into the way of behaving in this manner. And, if you go on speaking to her as you do, she soon become ever so much the more unreasonable." "I like her such as she is," Dowager Lady Chia laughed. "Besides, she's truly no child, ignorant of the distinction between high and low. When we are at home, with no strangers present, we ladies should be on terms like these, and as long, in fact, as we don't overstep propriety, it's all right. If not, what would be the earthly use of making them behave like so many saints?" While banding words, they entered the pavilion in a body. After tea, Lady Feng hastened to lay out the cups and chopsticks. At the upper table then seated herself old Lady Chia, Mrs. Hsu, Bao-Chiau, Daiyu, and Pao-yü. Round the table on the east sat Shi Xiangyun, Madame Wang, Ying Chun, Tan Chun, and Shi Chun. At the small table, leaning against the door on the west side, Li Wan and Lady Feng assigned themselves places. But it was for the mere sake of appearances, as neither of them ventured to sit down, but remained in attendance at the two tables, occupied by old Lady Chia and Madame Wang. "You'd better," Lady Feng said, "not bring in too many crabs at a time. Throw these again into the steaming basket. Only serve 10. And when they're eaten, a fresh supply can be fetched." Asking, at the same time, for water, she washed her hands and, taking her position near Dowager Lady Chia, she scooped out the meat from a crab, and offered the first help to Mrs. Hsu. "They'll be sweeter were I to open them with my own hands," Mrs. Hsu remarked. "There's no need for anyone to serve me." Lady Feng, therefore, presented it to old Lady Chia and handed a second portion to Pao-yü. "Make the wine as warm as possible and bring it in." She then went on to cry. "Go," she added, directing the servant girls, "and fetch the powder, made of green beans, and scented with the leaves of chrysanthemums, and the stamens of the Ulia fragrans. And keep it ready to rinse our hands with." Shi Xiangyun had a crab to bear the others company, but no sooner had she done than she retired to a lower seat, from where she helped her guests. When she, however, walked out a second time to give orders to fill 2 dishes and send them over to Mrs. Chow, she perceived Lady Feng come up to her again. "You're not accustomed to entertaining," she said, "so go and have your share to eat. I'll attend to the people for you first, and when they've gone, I'll have all I want." Xiangyun would not agree to her proposal, but giving further directions to the servants to spread 2 tables under the veranda on the offside, she pressed Yuan Yang Hu Po, Sa Sha Sha Sa Yun and Ping to go and seat themselves. Lady Secunda consequently ventured Yuan Yang, "You're in here doing the honors, so may I go and have something to eat?" "You can all go," replied Lady Feng. "Leave everything in my charge and it will be all right." While these words were being spoken, Shi Xiangyun resumed her place at the banquet. Lady Feng and Li Wan then took hurry-scurry something to eat as a matter of form. But Lady Feng came down once more to look after things. After a time, she stepped out on the veranda where Yuan Yang and the other girls were having their refreshments in high glee. As soon as they caught sight of her, Yuan Yang and her companions stood up. "What has your ladyship come out again for?" they inquired. "Do let us also enjoy a little peace and quiet." This chit Yuan Yang is worse than ever. Lady Feng laughed. Here I'm slaving away for you, and instead of feeling grateful to me, you bear me a grudge. But don't you yet quick pour me a cup of wine? Yuan Yang immediately smiled, and filling a cup, she applied it to Lady Feng's lips. Lady Feng stretched out her neck and emptied it. But Hu Po and Sa Xia thereupon likewise replenished a cup and put it to Lady Feng's mouth. Lady Feng swallowed the contents of that as well. Ping He had, by this time, brought her some yellow meat which she had picked out from the shell. Pour plenty of ginger and vinegar, shouted Lady Feng, and in a moment, she made short work of that too. You people, she smiled, had better sit down and have something to eat, for I'm off now. You brazen-faced thing, exclaimed Yuan Yang laughingly. To eat what was intended for us. Don't be so captious with me, smiled Lady Feng. Are you aware that your master secundus, Mr. Lin, has taken such a violent fancy to you that he means to speak to our old lady to let you be his secondary wife? Yuan Yang blushed crimson. Sui, she shouted. Are these really words to issue from the mouth of a lady? But if I don't daub your face all over with my filthy hands, I won't feel happy. Saying this, she rushed up to her. She was about to besmear her face when Lady Feng pleaded. My dear child, do let me off this time. Lo! That girl Yuan, laughed Hu Po, wishes to smear her, and that hussy Ping still spares her. Look here, she has scarcely had 2 crabs, and she has drunk a whole saucerful of vinegar. Ping was holding a crab full of yellow meat, which she was in the act of cleaning. As soon therefore as she heard this taunt, she came, crab in hand, to spatter Hu Po's face, as she laughingly reviled her. I'll take you minx with that cajoling tongue of yours, she cried. But Hu Po, while also indulging in laughter, drew aside. So Ping beat the air, and fell forward, daubing, by a strange coincidence, the cheek of Lady Feng. Lady Feng was at the moment having a little good-humored raillery with Yuan Yang, and was taken so much off her guard that she was quite startled out of her senses. Ya, she ejaculated. The bystanders found it difficult to keep their countenance, and with one voice, they exploded into a boisterous fit of laughter. Lady Feng as well could not help feeling amused, and smilingly she upbraided her. You stupid wench, she said. Have you by gorging lost your eyesight that you recklessly smudge your mistress' face? Ping He hastily crossed over and wiped her face for her, and then went in person to fetch some water. Oh dash me dash to dash foo, ejaculated Yuan Yang. This is a distinct retribution. Dowager Lady Chia, though seated on the other side, overheard their shouts, and she consecutively made inquiries as to what they had seen to tickle their fancy so. Tell us, she urged, what it is so that we too should have a laugh. Our Lady Secunda, Yuan Yang and the other maids forthwith laughingly cried, came to steal our crabs and eat them. And Ping got angry and daubed her mistress' face all over with yellow meat. So our mistress and that slave girl are now having a scuffle over it. This report filled Dowager Lady Chia, Madame Wang, and the other inmates with them with much merriment. Do have pity on her. Dowager Lady Chia laughed, and let her have some of those small legs and entrails to eat, and have done. Yuan Yang and her companions assented, much amused. Mistress Secunda, they shouted in a loud tone of voice, you're at liberty to eat this whole tableful of legs. But having washed her face clean, Lady Feng approached old Lady Chia and the other guests and waited upon them for a time, while they partook of refreshments. Daiyu did not, with her weak physique, venture to overload her stomach, so, partaking of a little meat from the claws, she left the table. Presently, however, Dowager Lady Chia too abandoned all idea of having anything more to eat. The company therefore quitted the banquet, and, when they had rinsed their hands, some admired the flowers, some played with the water, others looked at the fish. After a short stroll, Madame Wang turned round and remarked to old Lady Chia, There's plenty of wind here. Besides, you've just had crabs. So it would be prudent for you, venerable senior, to return home and rest. And if you feel in the humor, we can come again for a turn tomorrow. Quite true, acquiesced Dowager Lady Chia in reply to this suggestion. I was afraid that if I left, now that you're all in exuberant spirits, I mightn't again be spoiling your fun. So I didn't budge. But as the idea originates from yourselves, do go as you please, while I retire. But, she said to Xiang Enyang, don't allow your cousin Secundus, Pao-yü, and your cousin Lin to have too much to eat. Then when Xiang Yun had signified her obedience, you two girls. Continuing, she recommended Xiang Yun and Pao-Chiau must not also have more than is good for you. Those things are, it's true, luscious, but they're not very wholesome. And if you eat immoderately of them, why, you'll get stomachaches. Both girls promised with alacrity to be careful. And, having escorted her beyond the confines of the garden, they retraced their steps and ordered the servants to clear the remnants of the banquet and to lay out a new supply of refreshments. There's no use of any regular spread out. Pao-yü interposed. When you are about to write verses, that big round table can be put in the center and the wines and eatables laid on it. Neither will there be any need to ceremoniously have any fixed seats. Let those who may want anything to eat go up to it and take what they like. And if we seat ourselves, scattered all over the place, won't it be far more convenient for us? Your idea is excellent, Pao-Chiau answered. This is all very well, Xiang Yun observed, but there are others to be studied besides ourselves. Issuing consequently further directions for another table to be laid, and picking out some hot crabs, she asked Shijin, Su Sichuan, Su Siechai, Shishu, Ru Hua, Ying Zhu Aimo and the other girls to sit together and form a party. Then having a couple of flowered rugs spread under the alia trees on the hills, she bade the matrons on duty, the waiting maids and other servants to likewise make themselves comfortable and to eat and drink at their pleasure until they were wanted, when they could come and answer the calls. Xiang Yun next fetched the themes for the verses and pinned them with a needle on the wall. They're full of originality, one and all exclaimed after perusal. We fear we couldn't write anything on them. Xiang Yun then went on to explain to them the reasons that had prompted her not to determine upon any particular rhymes. Yes, quite right, put in Pao-yü. I myself don't fancy hard and fast rhymes. But Lin Taiyu, being unable to stand much wine and to take any crabs, told, on her own account, a servant to fetch an embroidered cushion. And, seating herself in such a way as to lean against the railing, she took up a fishing rod and began to fish. Pao-Chiau played for a time with a twig of alia she held in her hand. Then resting on the windowsill, she plucked the petals and threw them into the water, attracting the fish, which went by, to rise to the surface and nibble at them. Xiang Yun, after a few moments of abstraction, urged Shijin and the other girls to help themselves to anything they wanted, and beckoned to the servants, seated at the foot of the hill, to eat to their heart's content. Tan Chun, in company with Li Wan and Shi Chun, stood meanwhile under the shade of the weeping willows, and looked at the widgeons and egrets. Ying Chun, on the other hand, was all alone under the shade of some trees, threading double jasmine flowers, with a needle specially adapted for the purpose. Pao-yü too watched Taiyu fishing for a while. At one time he leant next to Pao-Chiau and cracked a few jokes with her. And at another, he drank, when he noticed Shijin feasting on crabs with her companions, a few mouthfuls of wine to keep her company. At this, Shijin cleaned the meat out of a shell, and gave it to him to eat. Taiyu then put down the fishing rod, and approaching the seats, she laid hold of a small black tankard, ornamented with silver plum flowers, and selected a tiny cup, made of transparent stone, red like a begonia, and in the shape of a banana leaf. A servant girl observed her movements, and, concluding that she felt inclined to have a drink, she drew near with hurried step to pour some wine for her. You girls had better go on eating, Taiyu remonstrated, and let me help myself. There'll be some fun in it then. So speaking, she filled for herself a cup half full. But discovering that it was yellow wine, I've eaten only a little bit of crab, she said, and yet I feel my mouth slightly sore. So what would do for me now is a mouthful of very hot distilled spirit. Pao-Chiau hastened to take up her remark. There's some distilled spirit, he chimed in. Take some of that wine. He there and then shouted out to a servant, scented with acacia flowers, and warm a tankard of it. When however it was brought, Daiyu simply took a sip and put it down again. Bao-Chiau too then came forward and picked up a double cup. But after drinking a mouthful of it, she lay it aside and, moistening her pen, she walked up to the wall and marked off the first theme, longing for chrysanthemums, below which she appended a character, Heng. "My dear cousin," promptly remarked Pao-yü. "I've already got 4 lines of the second theme, so let me write on it." I managed, after ever so much difficulty, to put a stanza together. Bao-Chiau smiled. "And are you now in such a hurry to deprive me of it?" Without so much as a word, Daiyu took a pen and put a distinctive sign opposite the 8th, consisting of, "Ask the chrysanthemums," and, singling out, in quick succession, the 11th, "Dream of chrysanthemums," as well. She too affixed for herself the word "Sheol" below. But Pao-yü likewise got a pen, and marked his choice, the 12th on the list, "Seek for chrysanthemums," by the side of which he wrote the character Chang. Tan Chun thereupon rose to her feet. "If there's no one to write on pinning the chrysanthemums," she observed, while scrutinizing the themes, "do let me have it. It has just been ruled," she continued, pointing at Pao-yü with a significant smile, "that it is on no account permissible to introduce any expressions bearing reference to the inner chambers, so you'd better be on your guard." But as she spoke, she perceived Xiang Yun come forward and jointly mark the 4th and 5th, that is, facing the chrysanthemums, and putting chrysanthemums in vases, to which she, like the others, appended a word Xiang. "You too should get a style or other," Tan Chun suggested. "In our home," smiled Xiang Yun, "there exist, it is true, at present several halls and structures, but as I don't live in either, there'll be no fun in it were I to borrow the name of any one of them." "Our venerable senior just said," Bao-Chiau observed laughingly, "that there was also in your home a water pavilion called Leaning on Russet Cloud's Hall, and is it likely that it wasn't yours? But albeit it doesn't exist nowadays, you were anyhow its mistress of old." "She's right," one and all exclaimed. Pao-yü therefore allowed Xiang Yun no time to make a move, but forthwith rubbed off the character Xiang for her and substituted that of Xia, russet. A short time only elapsed before the compositions on the 12 themes had all been completed. After they had each copied out their respective verses, they handed them to Ying Chun, who took a separate sheet of snow-white fancy paper and transcribed them together, affixing distinctly under each stanza the style of the composer. Li Wan and her assistants then began to read, starting from the first on the list, the verses which follow: "Longing for chrysanthemums," by the Princess of Heng-wu. "With anguish sore I face the western breeze, and wrapped in grief I pine for you. What time the smart weed russet turns, and the reeds white, my heart is rent in two. When in autumn the hedges thin, and gardens waste, all trace of you is gone. When the moon waxeth cold, and the dew pure, my dreams then know something of you. With constant yearnings my heart follows you as far as wild geese homeward fly. Lonesome I sit in London ear till a late hour to the sound of the block. For you, the yellow flowers, I've grown haggard and worn, but who doth pity me, and breathe one word of cheer that a 9th moon I will soon meet you again. Search for chrysanthemums, by the gentleman of I Hung. When I have naught to do, I'll seize the first fine day to try and stroll about. Neither wine cups nor cups of medicine will then deter me from my wish. Who plants the flowers in all those spots, facing the dew and under the moon's rays? Outside the rails they grow and by the hedge. But in autumn where do they go? With sandals waxed I come from distant shores. My feelings all exuberant. But as on this cold day I can't exhaust my song, my spirits get depressed. The yellow flowers, if they but knew how comfort to a poet to afford, would not let me this early morn trudge out in vain with my cash-laden staff. Planting chrysanthemums, by the gentleman of I Hung. When autumn breaks I take my hoe, and moving them myself out of the park, I plant them everywhere near the hedges and in the foreground of the halls. Last night, when least expected, they got a good shower which made them all revive. This morn my spirits still rise high, as the buds burst in bloom bedecked with frost. Now that it's cool, 1,000 stanzas on the autumn scenery I sing. In ecstasies from drink, I toast their blossom in a cup of cold and fragrant wine. With spring water, I sprinkle them, cover the roots with mold and well tend them, so that they may, like the path near the well, be free of every grain of dirt. Facing the chrysanthemums, by the old friend of the hall reclining on the russet clouds. From other gardens I transplant them, and I treasure them like gold. One cluster bears light-colored bloom. Another bears dark shades. I sit with head uncovered by the sparse-leaved artemisia hedge, and in their pure and cool fragrance, clasping my knees, I hum my lays. In the whole world, methinks, none see the light as peerless as these flowers. From all I see you have no other friend more intimate than me. Such autumn splendor I must not misuse, as steadily it fleets. My gaze I fix on you as I am fain each moment to enjoy. Putting chrysanthemums in vases, by the old friend of the hall reclining on the russet clouds. The lute I thrum, and quaff my wine, joyful at heart that you're meet to be my mates. The various tables on which you're laid, adorn with beauteous grace this quiet nook. The fragrant dew, next to the spot I sit, is far apart from that by the three paths. I fling my book aside and turn my gaze upon a twig full of your autumn bloom. What time the frost is pure, a new dream steals o'er me, as by the paper screen I rest. When cold holdeth the park, and the sun's rays do slant, I long and yearn for you, old friends. I too differ from others in this world, for my own tastes resemble those of yours. The vernal wines do not hinder the peach tree and the pear from bursting forth in bloom. Singing chrysanthemums, by the Xiao-Hsiang consort, eating the bread of idleness, the frenzy of poetry creeps over me both night and day. Round past the hedge I wend, and, leaning on the rock, I intone verses gently to myself. From the point of my pencil emanate lines of recondite grace, so near the frost I write. Some scent I hold by the side of my mouth, and, turning to the moon, I sing my sentiments. With self-pitying lines pages I fill, so as utterance to give to all my cares and woes. From these few scanty words, who could fathom the secrets of my heart about the autumn tide? Beginning from the time when Tao, the magistrate, did criticize the beauty of your bloom, yea, from that date remote up to this very day, your high renown has ever been extolled. Drawing chrysanthemums, by the Princess of Heng-wu. Verses I've had enough, so with my pens I play. With no idea that I am mad. Do I make use of pigments red or green as to involve a task of toilsome work? To form clusters of leaves, I sprinkle simply here and there 1,000 specks of ink. And when I've drawn the semblance of the flowers, some spots I make to represent the frost. The light and dark so lifelike harmonize with the figure of those there in the wind, that when I've done tracing their autumn growth, a fragrant smell issues under my wrist. Do you not mark how they resemble those by the east hedge, which you leisurely pluck? Upon the screens their image I affix to solace me for those of the ninth moon. Asking the chrysanthemums, by the Xiao-Hsiang consort, your heart in autumn, I would like to read, but know it no one could. While humming with my arms behind my back on the east hedge I rap. So peerless and unique are that who is meet with you to stay? Why are you of all flowers the only ones to burst the last in bloom? Why in such silence plunge the garden dew and the frost in the hall? Why in such silence the hall? Why in such silence plunge the garden dew? And the frost and dew and the garden dew and the frost in the hall? When wild geese homeward fly and crickets sicken, do you think of me? Do not tell me that in the world none of you grow with power of speech. But if you fathom what I say, why not converse with me a while? Pinning the chrysanthemums in the hair, by the visitor under the banana trees. I put some in a vase, and plant some by the hedge, so day by day I have ample to do. I pluck them, yet don't fancy they are meant for girls to pin before the glass in their coiffure. My mania for these flowers is just as keen as was that of the squire, who once lived in Chang'an. I rave as much for them as raved Mr. Ping Si, when he was under the effects of wine. Cold is the short hair on his temples and moistened with dew, which on it dripped from the three paths. His flaxen turban is suffused with the sweet fragrance of the autumn frost in the ninth moon. That strong weakness of mine to pin them in my hair is viewed with sneers by my contemporaries. They clap their hands, but they are free to laugh at me by the roadside as much as ere they list. The shadow of the chrysanthemums, by the old friend of the hall reclining on the russet clouds. In Layers upon layers their autumn splendor grows and air thick and thicker. I make off furtively and stealthily transplant them from the 3 crossways. The distant lamp inside the window frame depicts their shade both far and near. The hedge riddles the moon's rays, like unto a sieve, but the flowers stop the holes. As their reflection cold and fragrant tarries here, their soul must too abide. The dew-dry spot beneath the flowers is so like them that what is said of dreams is trash. Their precious shadows, full of subtle scent, are trodden down to pieces here and there. Could anyone with eyes half closed from drinking not mistake the shadow for the flowers? Dreaming of Chrysanthemums by the Hsiao-Hsiang consort. What vivid dreams arise as I doze by the hedge amidst those autumn scenes. Whether clouds bear me company or the moon be my mate, I can't discern. In fairyland I soar, not that I would become a butterfly like Chang. So long I for my old friend Tao the magistrate that I again seek him, in a sound sleep I fell. But so soon as the wild geese cried, they broke my rest. The chirp of the cicadas gave me such a start that I bear them a grudge. My secret wrongs to whom can I go and divulge when I wake up from sleep? The faded flowers and the cold mist make my feelings of anguish know no bounds. Fading of the chrysanthemums by the visitor under the banana trees. The dew congeals, the frost waxes in weight, and gradually dwindles their bloom. After the feast, with the flower show, follows the season of the little snow. The stalks retain still some redundant smell, but the flower's golden tinge is faint. The stems do not bear sign of even one whole leaf. Their verdure is all past. Not but the chirp of crickets strikes my ear, while the moon shines on half my bed. Near the cold clouds, distant 1,000 lie, a flock of wild geese slowly fly. When autumn breaks again next year, I feel certain that we will meet once more. We part, but only for a time, so don't let us indulge in anxious thoughts. Each stanza they read they praised, and they heaped upon each other incessant eulogiums. Let me now criticize them. I'll do so with all fairness. Li Wan smiled. As I glance over the page, she said, I find that each of you has some distinct admirable sentiments. But in order to be impartial in my criticism today, I must concede the first place to singing the chrysanthemums, the second to asking the chrysanthemums, and the third to dreaming of chrysanthemums. The original nature of the themes makes the verses full of originality, and their conception still more original. But we must allow to the Hsiao-Hsiang consort the credit of being the best. Next in order following: pinning chrysanthemums in the hair, facing the chrysanthemums, putting the chrysanthemums in vases, drawing the chrysanthemums, and longing for chrysanthemums, as second best. This decision filled Pao-yü with intense gratification. Clapping his hands. Quite right, it's most just, he shouted. My verses are worth nothing, Daiyu remarked. Their fault, after all, is that they are a little too minutely subtle. They are subtle, but good, Li Wan rejoined. For there's no artificialness or stiffness about them. According to my views, Daiyu observed, the best line is, when cold holdeth the park and the sun's rays do slant, I long and yearn for you, old friends. The metonymy, I fling my book aside and turn my gaze upon a twig of autumn, is already admirable. She has dealt so exhaustively with putting chrysanthemums in a vase, but she has left nothing unsaid that could be said, and has had in consequence to turn her thought back and consider the time anterior to their being plucked and placed in vases. Her sentiments are profound. What you say is certainly so, explained Li Wan, smiling. But that line of yours, some scent I hold by the side of my mouth, beats that. After all, said Tan Chen, we must admit that there's depth of thought in those of the Princess of Heng-wu with, in autumn all trace of you is gone. And my dreams then know something of you. They really make the meaning implied by the words long for stand out clearly. Those passages of yours, cold is the short hair on his temples and moistened, and his flaxen turban is suffused with the sweet fragrance, laughingly observed Pao-Chiau, likewise bring out the idea of pinning the chrysanthemums in the hair, so thoroughly that one couldn't get a loophole for fault-finding. Shang Yun then smiled. Who is meet with you to stay? She said, and burst the last in bloom. Are questions so straight to the point set to the chrysanthemums, that they are quite at a loss what answer to give. Or what you say, I sit with head uncovered, and, clasping my knees, I hum my lays, as if you couldn't, in fact, tear yourself away for even a moment from them. Li Wan laughed. To come to the knowledge of the chrysanthemums, why, they would certainly be sick and tired of you. This joke made everyone laugh. I'm last again, smiled Pao-yü. Is it likely that, who plants the flowers? In autumn, where do they go? With sandals waxed I come from distant shores. And as on this cold day I can't exhaust my song. Do not all forsooth amount to searching for chrysanthemums? And that last night they got a shower, and this morn, bedecked with frost. Don't both bear on planting them? But unfortunately they can't come up to these lines. Some scent I hold by the side of my mouth, and turning to the moon I sing my sentiments. In their pure and cool fragrance, clasping my knees I hum my lays. Short hair on his temples, his flaxen turban. Golden tinge is faint. Verdure is all past. In autumn, all trace of you is gone. My dreams then know something of you. But tomorrow, he proceeded, if I have got nothing to do, I'll write 12 stanzas myself. Yours are also good, Li Wan pursued. The only thing is that they aren't as full of original conception as those other lines. That's all. But after a few further criticisms, they asked for some more warm crabs. And, helping themselves, as soon as they were brought from the large circular table, they regaled themselves for a time. With the crabs today in one's hand and the alia before one's eyes, one cannot help inditing verses, Pao-yü smiled. I've already thought of a few. But will any of you again have the pluck to devise any? With this challenge, he there and then hastily washed his hands and, picking up a pen, he wrote out what his companions found on perusal, to run in this strain. When in my hands I clasp a crab, what most enchants my heart is the cashe's cool shade. While I pour vinegar and ground ginger, I feel from joy as if I would go mad. With so much gluttony, the prince's grandson eats his crabs that he should have some wine. The side-walking young gentleman has no intestines in his frame at all. I lose sight in my greediness that in my stomach cold accumulates. To my fingers a strong smell doth adhere, and though I wash them, yet the smell clings fast. The main secret of this is that men in this world make much of food. The Pao spirit has laughed at them that all their lives they only seek to eat. I could readily compose 100 stanzas with such verses in no time, Daiyu observed with a sarcastic smile. Your mental energies are now long ago exhausted, Pao-yü rejoined laughingly. And instead of confessing your inability to devise any, you still go on heaping invective upon people. Daiyu, upon catching this insinuation, made no reply of any kind. But slightly raising her head, she hummed something to herself for a while, and then taking up a pen she completed a whole stanza with a few dashes. The company then read her lines. They consisted of, e'en after death, their armor and their lengthy spears are never cast away. So nice they look, piled in the plate, that first to taste them I'd fain be. In every pair of legs they have, the crabs are full of tender jade-like meat. Each piece of ruddy fat, which in their shell bumps up, emits a fragrant smell. Besides much meat, they have a greater relish for me still, 8 feet as well. Who bids me drink 1,000 cups of wine in order to enhance my joy? What time I can behold their luscious food, with the fine season doth accord, when cashews wave with fragrance pure, and the chrysanthemums are decked with frost. Pao-yü had just finished conning it over and was beginning to sing its praise, when Daiyu, with one snatch, tore it to pieces and bade a servant go and burn it. As my compositions can't come up to yours, she then observed, I'll burn it. Yours is capital, much better than the lines you wrote a little time back on the chrysanthemums. So keep it for the benefit of others. I've likewise succeeded, after much effort, in putting together a stanza. Baoyu laughingly remarked. It cannot, of course, be worth much, but I'll put it down for fun's sake. As she spoke, she too wrote down her lines. When they came to look at them, they read, On this bright beauteous day, I bask in the Dromindra shade, with a cup in my hand. When I was at Chang'an, with driveling mouth, I longed for the 9th day of the 9th moon. The road stretches before their very eyes, but they can't tell between straight and transverse. Under their shells in spring and autumn only reigns a vacuum, yellow and black. At this point, they felt unable to refrain from shouting. Excellent! She abuses in fine style, Pao-yü shouted. But my lines should also be committed to the flames. The company thereupon scanned the remainder of the stanza, which was couched in this wise. When all the stock of wine is gone, chrysanthemums then used to scour away the smell. So as to counteract their properties of gathering cold, fresh ginger you should take. Alas! Now that they have been dropped into the boiling pot, what good do they derive? About the moonlit river banks there but remains the fragrant aroma of corn. At the close of their perusal, they with one voice explained that this was a first-rate song on crab-eating. That minor themes of this kind should really conceal lofty thoughts, before they could be held to be of any great merit, and that the only thing was that it chaffed people rather too virulently. But while they were engaged in conversation, Ping-er was again seen coming into the garden. What she wanted is not, however, yet known. So, reader, peruse the details given in the subsequent chapter.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more excellent content.